How's it going? And welcome to episode 139 of On the Wire. Proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter at On the Wire Pod. I am Adam Howe. You can follow me at 8th grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin Hasting is at Hasting Kevin on the Twitter. And we are back once again. Talk, our pretty typical off-season banter. We kind of pick one kind of subject to kind of focus in on, Kevin. And we're finally getting some actual news to sprinkle in there as well. So we'll get to that. So some signings, a trade, it's fun to watch the news kind of trickle in, especially when it happens like two or three days straight.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, many would say the tradition, unlike any other, occurs in April, but I think it occurs on the Wednesday prior to Thanksgiving when we get the PDF version of the baseball forecaster out as well. So there's not a lack of things to do for baseball fans over the holiday weekend.
Yeah. We, I know you did your quick gladiator last week. My slow gladiator just finished up. And it's funny. I felt much better about that draft than I did about our own listener league. Both 15 teamers, obviously rosters are a little bit different, but felt a little different, a little bit better. It's nice to get, that second draft under your belt. And we should have our first 12 team listener league filled at hopefully while we're recording. All our invites are out. We're just waiting for the last two to hit the little register button. So who knows? Betting on our KDS, everybody registers quickly. Maybe one of us will have our first round pick on the clock when while we're recording.
That would be awesome. Yeah, I want a couple of trips to the computer on Thanksgiving. That's what I'm looking forward to.
One of those things. Well, you're going to the bathroom a lot. It's a turkey. I'm sorry. Exactly. I'm sorry. It's a turkey. Yeah. I'm on the turn. I'm sorry. I'll be right back.
Exactly.
Got to get your excuses ready now. All right. Like I said, we got a lot of news and notes to talk about. Things have been trickling in, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some injury-plagued players that either ended the season on a low note in the injury realm, or have already gone through some kind of early off-season surgery, and kind of test the waters, Kevin, about how you feel about where you're drafting them. If you're drafting them, again, we'll play my favorite game. We'll play a little ask and see where you're drafting these guys depending on the platform or the type of league you're in. But first, let's get into some of these signings that came in. First and foremost, the big one, Aaron Nola. He's staying in Philadelphia probably for the rest of his career at this rate, unless a trade goes through, halfway through. 7 years added on to his time in Philadelphia. I can't imagine this changes really much. The only thing that I kind of look at this as, it's always nice to see the team that the player's been on for a long time stay with that team. It gives me more confidence. We talked about this with Kershaw last week, where if anybody but the Dodgers sign him, you said this last year, I'm not as interested. Nola, not really an injury concern per se, but has a lot of innings on that arm. But at the same time, it's still nice to see that the confidence of his team was there to sign him for such a long-term deal. Has your opinion of Nola changed due to this signing? How are you looking at him in drafts?
It's changed slightly. I don't think I'd have been worried about him anywhere he went, but I'm not worried at all now, for reasons you gave, and just the, being comfortable. And this is the team he knows. I think this is one player where, when you look at projections, I typically say that there's not a lot I want to change unless I want to adjust the playing time and then adjust on the per inning or per at bat basis. However, with Aaron Nola, and we know the every other year thing with Aaron Nola, right? Well, 2 of the last 3 years have been the odd number of years where his underlying skills have been the same. his ERA has been inflated. So his ERA projections, I think, are probably on the high side. Steamer has him at a 3.8 ERA, but that's taken into account a 4.46 and a 4.63 in two of the last three seasons. So I think you can probably lean a little lower than that when you're thinking about Aaron Nola and other players you might be considering at the same time in a draft.
Two drafts in the books, Kevin, and 2.5 drafts in the books, if I'm not mistaken, for you. You have Nola anywhere?
I do not. I've been waiting longer than that on pitching.
Yeah. Oh, in general, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how. Like, I know the whole odd even thing. I don't. In the two drafts I've completed so far, Nola's not on either one of them. He's not a target of mine right now, and part of it was the free agency, but also just. You can only buy in. You can only buy into that whole odd even narrative so much, right? It's like it's just a fun thing, fun little coincidence to look at. Manny Machado's batting average kind of fit the same bill for a long time. For like 4 or 5 years, I feel like every other year he was hitting like 300, and every other year he was hitting like 250. And so I don't know. Nola just hasn't been one of those guys that I've been targeting. I don't know that this will make me target him more, but it will make me less concerned. So it's kind of mirroring a lot of the things that you said about any kind of concerns I might have had, probably out the window, or didn't really change that much at all. Another signing, though, of somebody who...
Yeah, and one more real quick thing on Nola, and it's not that I'm necessarily buying into the every other year thing.
Sure.
It's just that 2 of the 3 years were the inflated ERA. So those are being factored in, especially the most recent year, into his projection pretty strongly. So I think the projected ERA could be a little high.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that's a good point, because most of these projections, are taking just the last 3 years worth of data. All right, like I said, another signing that came in for at least multi-years, changing teams once again. Reynaldo Lopez, he signed a 3-year deal with Atlanta, and Atlanta has said that they plan on stretching him out as a starter to begin 2024. I should mention, it's very important clause in all of these free agent signings in Atlanta. He will be donating 1% of his salary to the Atlanta Braves Foundation, or whatever the name of their foundation is. That was an interesting wrinkle I've been seeing in all of these press releases. I don't know that he had much of a choice in the matter, but it's nice of him to do that, right? So I have 2 questions regarding that. I mean, knowing that Reynaldo Lopez is going to at least start spring training, if not the regular season, as a starting pitching option, as a rotation option for Atlanta, does this put him on your radar for a late draft pick, especially with what Atlanta went through this year with health and opportunities arising in that rotation, or is it just bound? Are they just bound to sign Lucas Giolito by default, and then that would just kick Reynaldo Lopez out of the rotation? I think that's just it's part of his contract, right?
I don't think I want him in my lineup if he is in the starting rotation. Now, he could have made other changes, obviously, but he wasn't good until he left the starting rotation. The ERAs in his career in the years he was starting games, 4.91, 4.72, 3.91 in 2018, the only good one or decent one, 5.38, 6.49. His ERAs didn't drop below 4 other than that 3.91 in 2018 until 2021 when he became a reliever, 3.43, 2.76, 3.27. And we know pitchers can throw with more max effort as a reliever. We know pitchers that have trouble with command can have more success as relievers, and I think that's Reynaldo Lopez. I don't want any part of him as a starter.
Of course, I joke about Lucas Giolito coming to take that job. They just seem to have been handcuffed as they move around the league,
right.
Over the last, their entire career. Of course, most recently being traded together to Anaheim and then to Cleveland as well. Of course, I added this last second, though, Kevin. Atlanta made room for the possibility of Reynaldo Lopez entering rotation by trading away Mike Soroka to the White Sox and for Aaron Bummer, and then Kyle Wright traded to your Kansas City Royals. Is this oh no, the Atlanta has no faith in them to stay healthy or to produce? I'm not touching them, kind of like a Tampa Bay syndrome that we might have, or are you excited to see what their new teams can do with them? I'll say that with as big of a grain of salt as I can in regard to the Chicago White Sox, but Kansas City has obviously had some up and down success rates, especially with pitchers they've traded for. Of course, I'm talking about Cole Reagans.
Right. And they have history with Atlanta. They do a lot of trading back and forth. And even with Dayton Moore gone now, who came to Kansas City from the Atlanta organization, they still work out things. And you see quite a bit of player movement between the two teams. A pitcher from Atlanta that had great success in Kansas City, not quite what he was before his injuries in Atlanta, was Mike Minor. That's what I'm hopeful here with Kyle Wright. And they did the same thing with Mike Minor, although I don't believe it was in trade, but it was they signed him as a free agent for 2 years, knowing he was going to miss the entirety of the first season of that deal. So I'm hopeful with Kyle Wright. I'm also excited to see what Atlanta can do with Jackson Kowar. We know how talented he was coming out of the draft, and Kansas City's pitching development that leaves a lot to be desired. Let's put it that way. So I'm excited to see what they can do with him as well. Soroka to the White Sox. Soroka just hasn't. He didn't even look good in the minor leagues this past year, and going to the White Sox organization that I don't have any confidence in. So, Kyle Wright obviously not going to help Kansas City in 2024. But I am excited to see what maybe he can do in 2025. Not much interest in Soroka, and very interested in seeing what Atlanta might be able to do with Jackson Kowar.
So I had to add this one in too, because we're talking about Kansas City. Of course, we have the Rule 5 draft coming up in a little while, but we know that Asa Lacy, former, I think, 4th overall draft pick, not protected by Kansas City, and knowing the pedigree that he at least brings to the table due to his high draft slot, he's going to get drafted in the Rule 5 draft. That's pretty I think that's, maybe it's not obvious. They didn't protect him. Maybe they know something we don't. I'm assuming he will. Drafting right now, does that make him more interesting to you to draft in anything above a DC or a draft and hold style, knowing he's going to be on a major league roster and who knows what kind of role he would have?
No, I think Kansas City thinks he'll clear waivers and remain with the team. I don't think he needs to be protected. He didn't pitch in 2023, and so and he's got 80 innings so far over 2021 and 2022, with the ERA approaching double digits. So I don't think they're worried about losing him. I think they fully expect him to still be with the organization, but I don't have any interest in him for 2024 at all.
Fair enough. All right. Another signing, a couple of 1-year deals going to St. Louis. This is just St. Louis's bag, right? Let's just find the oldest starting pitchers that are that want to be signed. Let's sign them on for I'll call it a 1.5 year deal for both these guys, because they both got team options attached. Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson both sign 1-year deal with a team option for 2025. Which of the two, pitching in St. Louis has typically been a positive thing, at least from, just looking at it from the outside. I'm like, oh, good. Like, we talk about hey, where do we want a pitcher to sign? If they sign in St. Louis, All right, pretty happy about this. Like the offense is, minus last year, it's been pretty good. They can hold their own. The pitching park has been positive. But these guys, obviously, Kyle Gibson, you don't really know what to expect from any given day. Doesn't matter who he's facing. He could be facing Oakland and get blown up, and he could be facing Houston, and he could, stroll right through. Lance Lynn, we are all well aware. Anybody who's drafted more than 5 teams last year probably had Lance Lynn at least on one of them, and so you lived through the Lance Lynn experience of 2024. Knowing all of that and going into 2023, going into 2024, which one of these guys do you trust more in the St. Louis uniform?
Can I answer this in spring training?
I would say we're not playing the game. There are no rules to this question. You can answer however you like.
It really depends on the velocity we see out of Lance Lynn. I mean, Suarez has been talking for years about 94 miles an hour being the key point for him with his four-seam fastball, and he's down to 92 in 2023. If that's what we see in spring training, or even lower in that, and think that 92 and a half is as high as he's going to get built up to, then Kyle Gibson is my answer. If we see 92 and a half, 93, expecting Lance Lynn to build up to 94, 95 early in the season, then he's my answer. It all depends on the velocity I see out of Lance Lynn when we start seeing spring training games.
Fair enough. All right. Last little signing that we got here on the notes here, back into the lineup. Paul DeJong signed a 1-year deal with the Chicago White Sox, making their middle infield Paul DeJong and Nicky Lopez at second base. Of course, puts a little bit more of a guarantee that Tim Anderson is going to find a new uniform next year. Maybe not a guarantee, but I think, just the fact that they were to sign somebody that they could put there for the whole season. So the question is, though, is Paul DeJong going to be the starting shortstop for the Chicago White Sox come opening day?
It looks that way right now. They would have to make another move. Like you said, their middle infield is Paul DeJong and Nicky Lopez. The way things look, and they're cutting money. We might see Brian Ramos at some point in 2024. He was playing mostly third base in the Arizona Fall League, so I don't think that shakes this up much. And so as of now, I don't see them spending much money or making any big deals, bringing in a veteran starter. They just did that. It's Paul DeJong. So we could see him for quite some time. And if we know in spurts, his power is real. It comes with a batting average drain, but in deep leagues, he's probably going to get the at-bats.
The thing is that there's not a ton of star power shortstops on the market still. Paul DeJong might have been it. Yeah.
It was last year.
Yeah, and they all signed long-term deals. Even Carlos Correa took him a little bit, but he finally got there. I mean, the guy that stands out as that they could sign that would just, of course, feel like it would be the most White Sox move ever is they could still sign Alberto Mondesi. And I feel like that kind of fits the bill. Like, let's just throw some stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Mondesi didn't play a game for the Red Sox all season. He could, if he's still interested in playing, he's going to have to sign some kind of prove it deal somewhere. And not a lot of teams are going to be willing to do that. But the White Sox could be that team. And if he were to prove it, obviously it becomes a trade chip in July. I'm pretty much wherever Mondesi signs, he's probably a trade chip in July if he's, has some kind of semblance of health, unless he actually signs on with a contender already and they're just trying to, find magic in a bottle.
Yeah, but will he get the playing time with a contender? I think he needs to, like you said, I think he needs a prove it deal with a team that's going to play him. And I think most contenders probably aren't going to throw him in the starting lineup right away.
Yeah. And not going to give him, a prove it kind of deal that he's going to want to get along, or at least to get a better deal in 2025. All right. So a couple signings. That was nice. But what was even nicer is to see a I'll say mid-November trade happen. So a trade happening before Thanksgiving, not just a rumor, but an actual pen to paper, changing uniforms. Seattle gets a couple of bullpen arms in Carlos Vargas and Sebi Zavala. And so that's nice that they're able to take off the books Eugenio Suarez and free up third base. A lot of the rumors swirling around that is, of course, now they have the opportunity to sign one of the free agent third basemen to kind of fill that role. But we see Suarez going to Arizona. He fills in that spot for the defending National League champions. Good move, bad move for Suarez as far as fantasy. He's filled my utility slot on my Gladiator team. Suarez usually plays quite a few games throughout the season, so I wasn't worried about that. It was a nice little power bump, and I'm not too worried about him moving from Seattle to Arizona as far as park factors go. But I don't see a whole lot of competition for him at the hot corner there. What's your take with Suarez in Arizona?
I'm going to be very careful, and it goes to something you just said, the park factors, because overall park factors over the past 3 years, when you look on StatCast, Seattle's dead last in the league, and Arizona mid-pack at like 16. However, what are we drafting Eugenio Suarez for? Power.
That's
right?
It.
Home runs. Seattle mid-pack, right just under league average. They're a 98, 100 being league average. And Arizona 26th, well below average for home runs. So the park factor move overall is good, but for what we want Suarez for, it's very bad. So I have been a fan of Suarez in the past, but this is a bit concerning to me. Also, there's a guy by the name of Jordan Lawler that if he comes up, we're probably looking at third base being taken away. That Suarez could DH a little bit, but I think this is a depth insurance move by Arizona, and I don't like the park factor. So this is dropping Suarez down my list quite a bit.
There's something to be said about you don't play all of your games at home. And right. At least a handful of games Suarez is going to get in Colorado, in LA, and in the rest of the National League West. So there's something to be said about that. You don't hold your hat on that. Obviously that's not the deciding factor. It's nice to see somebody move into the NL West so that, you get at least a handful of games in Colorado. So that's nice. And then we don't usually bring it up, but I figured it's worth, just throwing out there whether or not you're worried about it, where you're monitoring it, especially while you're drafting now, because anything can happen. We started seeing the rumors swirl that the Toronto Blue Jays very well may be shopping Bo Bichette in a trade. The most recent one that came through is the possibility of Bo Bichette being traded to the Chicago Cubs, where he would possibly be playing third base instead of shortstop, obviously with that position already filled with a long-term deal there. Are you, when you see rumors like this and news like this, are you more worried about the player in question, in this case Bo Bichette, or the team in where they kind of feel, the team that he would be leaving behind, in this case Toronto, and where they're at as far as are other players going to get moved? What do we do with George Springer? With is Vlad going to not sign a long-term deal? Is he's going to get moved? Where's your head at when you see rumors like this?
This makes absolutely no sense at all to me. I do not see this happening. He's already signed for his arbitration years. Mm-hmm. He's making $11 million a year for 2 more seasons, 2024 and 2025. That's cheap for anybody, let alone somebody like Bo Bichette, who, other than not running, And he dropped drastically in his stolen base attempts in 2022 from 2021 as well. That continued to drop, but the power was still there. The runs, the RBI is still there. He hit over 300. As far as a fantasy player, other than not getting the stolen bases, I think the talk of it being a disappointing year for Bichette is way overblown. I don't see this happening. I really don't, unless there's something going on internally with the organization and him not getting along with teammates or coaching staff. I do not see this happening at all.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then sure, this is a one time. It's a one deal done. Okay, cool. We'll use it to restock some other position of need or whatever. Because, like you said, the value that he brings, at least from a managerial standpoint, from a business standpoint, is you could have your pick of whoever you want, right? Or do I want a player that's going to help me fill a gap somewhere else, or do I want high end prospects? What you get your pick of the litter when it comes to trading somebody in that situation, like we see Bo Bichette. But if it is just
different, if Toronto really needed pitching, right? Then maybe we'd understand it if that's what they were going after.
Sure, if they're going a complete opposite direction.
But with Gossman, Barrios, Bassett, Kikuchi, it's not pitching they're after. So, yeah, I just don't see this happening.
Yeah, if they wanted to fill a different position, they just asked Bo Bichette to go move positions.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other not rumors around, but just the thought process that I've seen going around is just maybe Toronto realizing how well and how quickly Baltimore moved up the AL East. As bad as a final record as the Red Sox and the Yankees had, they don't have bad teams, and they are still the Red Sox and the Yankees. It's still the AL East, and Tampa Bay is still Tampa Bay. Like is this really their window? And so I get it from that perspective. It's like, hey, you got to realize where your opportunities lay, and if the opportunity isn't in the next 2 years during his contract, maybe is this the most value you're going to get? And if you're going to do that, that's a domino that's gonna
I was going to say then it's where you were trying to lead to. Everybody's going if that's the case.
Exactly.
That would be insane.
So, we'll see what happens.
If you're ever going to be able to compete with those teams, isn't it with this core they have now?
Oh, absolutely.
If you're giving up now, then why even play?
Why even play the game?
This it would be Oakland all over again, right? If that happens, and probably worse than Oakland if they let them all go at once. I don't see it happening.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a lot more news than we had to talk about last week. Even threw in some rumors in there as well, just for fun's sake. But we're going to get into some talk regarding some injury concerns that we have. And as we're drafting, it is something you obviously have to consider, especially when you're drafting with literally no information in October, November, December drafts. Before we do that, I do have to talk to you a little bit about our sponsor that we have for the show this week. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Factor. This holiday season, you might be looking for nutritious, convenient meals to keep you energized on jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service, they can help you fuel up fast for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, you'll eat well, you'll stay on track with your healthy lifestyle while tackling all of your holiday to-dos, which I'm sure are plentiful for everybody. If you're too busy with holiday plans to cook, but want to make sure you're eating well, with Factor, you could skip the extra trip to the grocery store, the chopping, the prepping, cleaning up, while still getting the flavor and nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat and enjoy. When you're too busy running around to plan lunch, Factor has you covered with lunch to go, effortless, wholesome meals like grain bowls, salad toppers that are ready to eat when you're on the go. No microwave required. So in this November, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. With Factor, you can rest assured you're making a sustainable choice. They offset 100% the delivery emissions and source 100% renewable electricity from their production sites and offices. They're ready in just 2 minutes, no prep, no mess. So head to factormeals.com/OTW50 and use code OTW50 to get 50% off. That's code OTW50 at factormeals.com/OTW50 to get 50% off. There's also a link in the show description. Enjoy your holidays with Factor. All right, Kevin. Now I got that out of the way. Thanks for listening to that. You know, you don't normally get to listen to our ad plugs there, so that's nice. Usually we just plug them in. But let's get back into the topic at hand here. We're talking about players that are either returning from injury into starting in 2024. A couple players went through, and we'll get into some of these specific players a little bit, they finished off the regular season, and then literally the next minute they went under the knife for one thing or another. Jazz Chisholm Jr., Manny Machado, a couple other guys that we're going to talk to come to mind. Other guys got shut down at the end of the year. We talked about Frankie Montas coming back for like an inning and a third. So that was nice to see. We'll get in, Zagnito came back at the very end of the year as well for the Angels. But as I alluded to earlier, it's like we see a headline for when they go in for surgery, and then we don't hear anything forever. I mean, I remember when Max Muncy hurt his non-throwing elbow. No, it was his throwing elbow. And we didn't hear about it until 2 months into the offseason. We were like, wait, what? What's going on? What are you doing to stay informed or not go crazy not knowing what's going on?
It's tough. I look at the same sites that most everybody does, trying to stay as updated as possible. I do follow as many team beat writers as I can on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I can get information there, but it's difficult. These days, we all have access to the same information. And if somebody finds something, and unless they are very, very good at keeping things close to the vest and not spreading news they find, I don't think that's most people. I think we all get the same information, so it's tough just scouring around. Jeff Zimmerman's mining the news. I know it's going to come up later in the show. Great spot to check out and try to find information, and that's really all we can do.
That's really the must spot to just be. Yeah. If it's not bookmarked, it should be one of the top things in your search engine. If you start autofilling your Google search bar with an M, mining the news should come up. If it's not, you should change that. I agree. I was hoping that for whatever reason you've been holding something back from me and you would have something else to give to me here. I think it's just really frustrating, obviously, when it's like you get so much information in season. If anything happens to somebody, you know about it. You usually know how their rehab is going or this or that, unless your name's Luis Robert and you play for the White Sox. Then you're just not sure what's going on. But it's really frustrating in the offseason where it's like, players are human beings. They're living their life. They're living at home. They're not being scrutinized, at least for the 3 months between when baseball season ends and the new year turns over. And so doing these early drafts, not knowing how the players that I talked about earlier that we know had surgery, and the last note you see on any of those little news items is expected to be ready for opening day. Cool. That's all I can go by. I'm like, all right, well, the last word I got was then. Positive.
Yes.
How much of a grain of salt do you take something like that, or how much do you weigh it when you're like, I just drafted Manny Machado in my Gladiator at third base because there's a pretty decent cliff at third base right around when you would have to draft Manny Machado. And I didn't want to fall off that cliff, to be honest. I didn't want to take that risk. But I took enough of a risk just by drafting him in the first place. How much of that risk are you willing to take on, specifically in a gladiator where you know you're going to have to play this guy and all these guys that you draft all year long?
I think Machado is a little different than many. I think this is something that the surgery will repair and he'll come back fine. Now the timeline may be a little bit in question, but I think even if he's not ready for the beginning of the season or not ready to play full time right as the season begins at the end of March, I don't think it's going to be long. I'm pretty comfortable with Manny Machado right now and taking the little bit of a discount that we're getting on Manny Machado. Other players where it's chronic things and it seems like it keeps happening over and over again, especially soft tissue injuries. We know those tend to recur more than other types of injuries. That's more worrisome. So it really depends on the injury, when the surgery took place. When we hear a timetable of 4 to 6 weeks or 4 to 8 weeks, don't ever plan on having him back in 4 weeks, or at least the expectation should be the high end of the timetable, especially if they're going to go on a rehab assignment or miss spring training. So that is the biggest thing for me. Don't ever think it's going to be the short end of the timetable. If it is, great, icing on the cake, but don't ever plan on it.
The recency bias is tough though, man. It's like you see somebody like you see Bryce Harper come back, which earlier than anybody expected him to come back from Tommy John surgery.
But he hit one home run in 3 months. You got to remember that part of it. Too, right?
I don't have to. I don't have to remember that. When I'm still drafting him at the end of a first round or the beginning of the second round. No, I don't have to.
I think we're fine for 2024, but it didn't work out so great in 2023, even with him coming back earlier than we expected.
But you see that, and then you see somebody who's went through almost exactly the same thing, and Jason Dominguez, having some version of Tommy John surgery. And then you get conflicting reports about how long he's going to miss out. And now, the most recent thing that I found is, don't expect him back until like All-Star break. But that was what, kind of what we expected out of Bryce Harper. Jason Dominguez, a lot younger. Well, not long. He's younger than Bryce Harper. You would hope that he could, come back from this kind of a surgery or from any kind of surgery, any kind of injury, a little bit quicker, maybe. Do you allow the recency bias of somebody like Bryce Harper coming back early, whether he produced or not, whatever, but he came back, when considering drafting? And I want to bring up Dominguez specifically because he's not his name's not on the list of the game we're going to play. So drafting somebody like this, is that something worth? I don't think he got drafted in my Gladiator, and I think that's for good reason.
I wouldn't touch him in a Gladiator.
But is that a wild card of enough of a play to maybe that's a guy you put into your utility, and that helps you? If he does come back early, that helps you. That bumps you up.
I don't think so. No. I think the age, yes, he should probably be able to heal a little more quickly, or at least as quick as somebody several years older than him, like Bryce Harper. However, the team is much less likely to push him, right? The Phillies needed Bryce Harper. They were planning on going back to the World Series. They needed Bryce Harper to do that. Yeah, and he's already getting paid. Jason Dominguez is a future asset right now. He got his cup of coffee. He's but very little from him. His value to the New York Yankees is what he could provide in the future. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him till September. I really wouldn't. I could, if he's going to be back, I've heard everything from All-Star break to August. If it's August and then he goes out, I don't think he goes straight to the New York Yankees.
I would say nice long rehab assignment. Yeah.
Nice long rehab assignment. get him in there in September, and they still have 6 years of control of Jason Dominguez. That's what I think is going to happen.
That's probably fair. All right. Well, I mean, that you can only take on so much risk, regardless of if you're going after a wild card like that or a guy who, even if you assume Manny Machado is going to come back and it's going to be fine, you still can only take on so much of that throughout your course of your draft, almost regardless of your format. Maybe you can take a little bit more risk in a fab league where you can make up the mistakes when more news comes out through spring training in the first couple of fab periods. But at the same time,
absolutely.
How much is too much?
We take risks with injured players. We're all different in our threshold for risk for injured players. We also take risks with prospects, and all of our thresholds are different on how much risk we'll take there. Why take both risks in the same player? That's the way I'm looking at it.
Fair enough. Yeah. Going back to Dominguez. Yeah. Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. You got to remember that the risk is the same. It's like, oh, well, I can take this much risk in injured players. And then also I can take this much risk in prospects. It's the same risk.
Not lane. Yes.
You can only take so many of them. So just keep that in mind. Unless you're in our 12-team listener league, which I haven't gotten the ding yet, so I'm assuming it hasn't filled yet, which is unfortunate. You can make all the mistakes you want. You can take as much risk as you like in that one. All right, Kevin, let's get into our game then. We'll get to some player discussions, specific players. I mentioned a couple of them so far to give you a preview, but we got a whole lot more to get into. We are going to do that right after this quick break. All right, let's get into Ask. Of course, that is Avoid, Stream, Keep. All right, turning in a injury edition for this week. Quick rules. There are 3 players in each group, Kevin. You did a good job last week of abiding by the rules. I'm going to hold you to that again this time. You've got to pick one player that you would avoid in all circumstances. So I say you wouldn't even draft them in a draft champion style draft. You have one player that you can stream, and more likely this is a player you would draft. You could not draft in a fab league, but you would pick him up in a fab period. You could also say that this is a guy that you would draft in the late rounds of a draft champions. He would be on your bench in a draft and hold, so that you could stream him in there throughout the course of the season. And then there's a guy you would keep. This is a guy you have to start. You have to draft, thus start all the year long in a gladiator format. Obviously, you got to think about lots of different things when we're talking about these players, the type of injuries, their injury history, how much time you expect them to miss, if any at all, to start the season. What kind of performance that you would expect to get back from them, a la Bryce Harper, as you mentioned earlier, or do you expect them to hit the ground running right away? A lot of things to talk about. The need of said player. You talked about that with Jason Dominguez for their team, what kind of role they would play when they came back, if they were to come back. So lots of things to think about. We'll get into all of that. Let's get into, I'm going to jump around, I think. I'm going to start closer to the top of the draft board here. On our sheet, it's group 2. We've got the off-injured Jazz Chisholm Jr. He dealt with some turf toe throughout the course of the season, elected not to have surgery until the season ended, hoping that he could help the Miami Marlins in the playoffs. That did not happen. So, of course, early October rolled around and he had surgery to repair his turf toe. Manny Machado, talked about him a lot already. He had early October surgery repair at his extensor tendon in his right elbow. Yes, he is right-handed, so that's something you have to consider as well. And then Nolan Arenado, he ended the season on the IL with the back injury, and based on his performance throughout the course of the season, you have to assume that he was dealing with some kind of injury, whether it's to his back or something else, throughout the course of the season, on and off. Of course, these names and pretty much every other name come from Jeff Zimmerman's other piece of work that he does at the beginning of every offseason. Players who probably or reported playing through some sort of injury. So check that out for a full list. Jeff does a great job compiling that every year. And we're only going to be talking about hitters in this episode. It's just If you're hoping I had a group of pitchers later on, this is only going to be hitters here, Kevin. But there's your 3 players that I'm going to ask you how you would draft these guys. Jazz Chisholm Jr., Manny Machado, Nolan Arenado. A couple of third basemen out now, and outfield only Jazz Chisholm mixed in there as well. What do you got?
This one's pretty tough. This is a ceiling or floor question for me. And with I'm not avoiding Nolan Arenado, but he is my avoid for this group. And then it's a ceiling or floor, both with a little bit of concern. As I mentioned, when you say you drafted Manny Machado, I'm not concerned that this is a lingering deal. The only concern is the timeline. Do we get him right away? Even if we don't, I think it's early in the season. He's the smart answer here for drafting a Gladiator. The upside play is Jazz Chisholm. And I have drafted Jazz Chisholm. I believe it was at the 3-4 turn of 15-team league, I think is where I took him. And that is it's an upside play. I mean, he had more home runs, one more home run, and one less stolen base. He went 19-22 in only 383 plate appearances in 2023. He was one home run shy of going 2020. The batting average, very stable with Jazz Chisholm. We've seen 248, 254, 250 the last 3 seasons. Write him down for 250. If it's better, great. I doubt it's worse, especially if he's healthy. But he's getting these numbers in 125 less plate appearances than he had those same numbers as a rookie. He's still only 25 years old. If he gets 600 plate appearances, easy 30-30 guy and could approach 40-40. That's the talent we're looking at with Jazz Chisholm. So it really depends on at that point in your draft, and him and Machado going about the same spot. You want the safe player, you want the upside play. I think in most cases, I'm probably taking the upside play with Jazz Chisholm here. 383 plate appearances in spite of the injuries, right? He didn't kill you. Yeah, sure. We wanted more, but somebody else in his spot the rest of the time, you did okay with that draft pick if you drafted him for 2023. I think that's the way I would go. But like I said, the smart move's probably Machado.
Yeah, my Gladiator, like I mentioned, got Machado, my starting third baseman. Well, yeah, he's my starting third baseman all season. Obviously, that's how the format works. Picked him at the top of the 5th round, so at the 4-5 turn, I was on that side of the turn. Chisholm won the same round, but on the opposite side. I will say what's interesting about this round was that there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pitchers taken between Machado and Chisholm, and only
so
2 other
are very close.
Yeah, and there were only 2 other position players in between. So yeah, they basically went 4 spots apart from each other. The way I look at it,
exactly.
So yeah, like you mentioned, Arenado 2 rounds later. But these guys very close, and that's why they're grouped together. Of course, obviously, none of these guys are streamable. They're all drafted in the top, 7-8 rounds, and that's why you have to be a little bit more flexible in the rules of the game for these top ones. I almost did like a Shohei, Jordan, Aaron Judge grouping, and I decided that's
you originally had that in the rundown.
Yeah,
I will bring it up there. My choice was going to be simply Shohei is the most fun to watch. He's the one I'm drafting. They all have the same concerns. They're all going early in drafts. That would have been my answer.
Yeah. You can avoid any of them you really want to, but it won't be by your choice though. Based on based on your draft.
You can only get one of them unless you're in an auction.
Yeah,
that's the answer.
All right, let's go back up to the top then here. We'll go way further down the draft board here with this grouping with Anthony Rizzo, who dealt with concussions for pretty much the entire second half of the season. Whether or not the Yankees actually put him on the IL was a whole nother can of worms. But he did end the season of course, on the IL due to concussions, did not finish the season on the active roster. Zach Neto of the Angels, he did end the season on the IL with a back injury. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He came back from a back injury toward the very end of the season. So it was nice to see him come back, get into your production. Like it goes into your notes about Bryce Harper. What kind of production do we actually see when he comes back? And then CJ Cron ended the year on the IL with his own lower back inflammation. So whether it's CJ Cron with his back injured at the end of the season, Neto with his back during the season, or Anthony Rizzo with his concussion concerns. How do these guys fall?
I'm going with drafting for a Gladiator, Zach Neto, in spite of him being really bad when he did come back. And in spite of him probably hitting at the bottom of the Angels lineup, at least to start the season. I am very concerned about both Anthony Rizzo and CJ Cron, both of them 34 years old, going into 2024. The fact that Rizzo's concussion didn't even get diagnosed until months after it occurred, and then we never saw him again on a playing field, is very concerning. I mean, there's so much we don't know. Like you said, have we heard anything about Rizzo since then? Not that I recall. CJ Cron, same thing. And I liked CJ Cron even before he went to Colorado when healthy, but he's had other injury concerns throughout his career. 34-year-old free agent. So I'm going with Neto here as who I would draft. I think he's the most likely to get regular playing time. The question becomes, which one would I stream? And I think I'm going to go with Rizzo just based on, I think it's more likely after all of the time off, hopefully, that all of his concussion symptoms have gone away and we see him in spring training and back out there in 2024. Now, we know he has back issues as well, but CJ Cron ended the year with back issues on the IL. So I think Rizzo's my streamer, and I'm going to have to avoid CJ Cron, although I am very interested to see where he lands. Be nice if he's... Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Cron, there's way more wild cards with CJ Cron, and it felt like one of those things where it's like nobody cared about CJ Cron until he went to Colorado, and then all of a sudden he, shot up draft boards when everybody knew where he was going to be playing there. And unless he goes back to Colorado, or I don't know why he would go to Cincinnati. I'm not sure that much is going to happen with his draft stock. He's got an ADP right now of 553, way lower than the other two. Rizzo only got drafted in my Gladiator. It's just one Gladiator. I'm sure that's different than every other one. But both Neto and Rizzo are right around 300, like the 300 pick. I think Neto's just shy of 300 and Rizzo's just like at 330 or somewhere right around there. And so neither one of those guys are, both of them would be streamable, like especially in a shallow format, whether it's a fab league and they get dropped right away when it's not super healthy. And then it turns out, they come back during the season, you'll be able to pick them up. They'll be free agents. But I agree. I think Neto would be probably the safest one. That's a weird way. Some of these groupings are difficult. It's like you say safest, you're like, but only in this context. All right, listen to the context. All right, let's move down to let's stay in order here. Let's go back up a little bit. We're going to go down to Group 5 here, Kevin. This one we've got a little bit of a mix of players who, they all pretty much ended the season injured, with the exception of the first one here, Xander Bogaerts. He ended strong, but that's only because he had a couple cortisone shots, as we were talking off air before we started, like he was very vocal about. He's like, no, I'm cool. I got some cortisone shots and I'll be fine. And then Brandon Lowe, he did end the season on the IL, but with a fractured right patella after getting hit there. And then Jose Miranda had surgery on his right shoulder in mid-September. He's also right-handed, something to keep in mind. So both those guys did end the season with some surgeries under their belt. Both reportedly going to be ready for spring training or at least the opening day. Xander Bogaerts, no surgery, but continuous concerns about the possibility of working through injuries throughout the season rather than, trying to figure it out. So how would these guys end up landing in your draft eyes, depending on your format?
Bogarts is the easy one to draft in a gladiator for me. I know he started off the season slowly, and yes, like you said, and like we talked earlier, he brought it up this season. He's like, yeah, this happens every year. I get this second cortisone shot and I'm good to go the rest of the season. Well, hopefully they figure out a way to get him ready to go at the beginning of the season, because he was amazing after that, for, like you said, finished very strong. So I like Bogarts here. I have drafted him in at least 2 of the 3 drafts I've done, possibly all 3, but I think just 2. I'm taking the discount there for sure. I think my streamer here is Miranda. I've always liked Brandon Lowe a little bit, but he's so streaky, which you would say that makes him a nice streamer, but the injuries off and on over the past couple of years, I think Miranda should be good to go after his surgery. And I think the Twins have big plans for Miranda. So I think he's my streamer in this exercise. Bogart's definitely the one I'm drafting of the 3. I like Brandon Lowe, but he's the one I'll let go here.
Yeah, there's just a little bit of a headache. And a lot of these guys we talked about.
He's more than a little bit of a headache.
Yeah. Well, it's also just the pain in remembering which one's Low and which one's Low. That's just part of the headache.
Yes.
Just imagine all 3 of those guys on the same team. Oh, that's right. They were at one point all on the same team. Yeah. And it's the constant concern of injuries. And then also not only that, but playing in Tampa where you're just not knowing what kind of playing time is going to get when healthy. Never mind.
Right. There was talk in 2023 when healthy that he's just a platoon bat. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, strong side, but we know that's how Tampa likes to work.
Sure. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I did take a shot on Lau in my Gladiator, or maybe that was my Fab League. I swear I did. I guess not. No, it wasn't me. Oh wait, that's right. I think I was considering him at the very end. And took Eugenio Suarez instead. Nobody. Oh no, I did take Brandon Lowe many rounds before Eugenio Suarez. At the top of the 17th round, so at that 16-17 turn, he's my starting second baseman. Because that seems to be the thing I do this year is I wait all the way until the very end of a draft to find my second baseman. I don't know how that's going to work out for me. We will obviously find out. Second base, not the easiest, especially in a Gladiator, to fill with somebody who's going to play every single day. All right, let's go back up real quick before we get to the fun one at the end. Go back up to group 3 here, Kevin. Guys are going, much later in drafts. These guys are all pretty much available everywhere at any time you want. Whether or not you actually want to draft them or not, we'll find out at least how Kevin feels. Dylan Carlson, he ended the season on this being transferred to the 60-day IL as he nursed his injured ankle. Taylor Ward, of course, everybody remembers getting hit in the face, had facial surgery short after that in early August. And he missed the rest of the season with recovering from that issue. Jake Fraley, surgery on his 4th toe. I loved reading this one. It's a very, very specific which toe it was. His fourth toe on his left foot in early October. I'll be honest, I couldn't even find what was wrong with his toe. But he have to have surgery on the fourth toe. I'm not sure what happened. You guys can find. I'm gonna look it up after this. I remember. I think my mom, when I was a little kid, like broke her like little baby toe, and it's like you can't do anything with it. It's like okay. Yeah. You just hope there's nothing you can do about that little toe. So this is the fourth one. It's a little bit more important than the baby toe, and so you got to take care of it. And Jake Fraley's doing that after he recovers from his surgery on it. So Dylan Carlson, Taylor Ward, Jake Fraley. What do you got, Kevin?
I think just because of the crowded outfield, I think Fraley is my avoid. So I'm going to start there just to get one out of the way. We got TJ Friedel, Spencer Steer, Will Benson. There is a DH spot, but they have so many infielders. If they want Ellie De La Cruz, Noelve Marte, Jonathan India, Matt McClain all playing, they got to use up that DH spot. Fraley's going to get some at bats, but he's not going to be an everyday player. So that's where I'm going to start, just to narrow this down a little bit. And then it's pretty easy for me because Dylan Carlson hasn't even been good when he is healthy yet in his career. And it hasn't been a short amount of time. We've been seeing this for four seasons now, major league at bats. So, and we have seen Taylor Ward be good.
Very good.
So
yes.
Taylor Ward is my draft, Carlson, my avoid, or oh gosh, one of these has got to be my streamer. Actually, I made this harder on myself. I think Fraley's my streamer, then not my avoid. I'm avoiding Carlson. Fraley is my streamer due to playing time, and hopefully we see a pattern of when they get him in games, and there will be certain matchups and platoon advantages we can take advantage of throughout the season as a streamer. So that's the way I will roll there. Yeah, I don't want to have anything to do with Dylan Carlson.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you like seeing Fraley in Cincinnati, but when you have so many mouths to feed, as you mentioned, it does make you concerned about how much.
And there are trade rumors with Cincinnati, have been since last season. If somebody gets moved, that could really help Jake Fraley, and then
it can help whoever doesn't get moved. Yeah,
he could become the draft guy. Or if he is moved to another team.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Of course, he'd miss that ballpark,
but if you get, you can volume your way to just as much, if not more, production with a full-time gig.
Exactly.
All right. Let's end it here with it's like the Captain Obvious grouping. I don't even have notes. I'm just like, these are just guys that you just know either are hurt as we're talking, will get hurt when we stop recording, or at some point in the season will be hurt. Byron Buxton, UT only Byron Buxton is on the list here. He wants to play outfield again. He wants to go back to center field in 2024. So we'll see how long it takes him to get the eligibility back after playing 10 games for the Twins in the outfield, if they give him that opportunity. His teammate Carlos Correa, who had to sign with 3 different teams in an offseason just because of injury concerns moving forward. And then Tyler O'Neill, who not only can't stay healthy, can't seem to get on the right side of now new management, obviously, in St. Louis, but they also have a crowded spot in their outfield as well. Byron Buxton, Carlos Correa, Tyler O'Neill. You do have to draft one of these guys in a gladiator to start all season long. Of course, you can avoid one of them and you can stream the other one. Who you got?
This time I'm going to go with my avoid first and actually stick with it. I dropped Carlos Correa mid-season last year, or in the second half, in a keeper league. Just dropped him. Even when healthy, he wasn't producing. So I let him go. He's my avoid here. Both of the others, I think, have more potential than him when healthy. The question becomes, which one is more valuable knowing you're not going to get 600 plate appearances probably from either one. There's a possibility one of them spikes a season here. Tyler O'Neill may have already done that in 2021, but that was 34 home runs and 15 stolen bases. I think I'm drafting him. And it comes back to the UT only with Buxton. If I have to leave him in my lineup, if it's a gladiator or even if it's a fab league and I have to put him in my lineup, I am not opposed to drafting UT only guys and drafting them early. David Ortiz, then Nelson Cruz, now JD Martinez is looks to be following in their footsteps. I love taking the discount on those players, but couple that with the injuries. Now they've said they want to play him in the outfield, but that just makes it more likely for him to get injured again. So This is crazy. And we had a similar question. I was a guest on Beat the Shift towards the end of the 2023 season, and a mailbag question was Tyler O'Neill or Byron Buxton. I went with Tyler O'Neill rest of season. Neither one worked out.
Sure.
The answer was neither.
Shocker.
But I think I'm sticking with Tyler O'Neill, and I'm not the most comfortable with that decision. We know what Buxton can do, but his batting average has plummeted, as has Tyler O'Neill's. And he doesn't run anymore. He ran more than I expected in 2023 when he did play. I think if Tyler O'Neill is healthy, the 2021 season is still in the cards for him. The over 30 home runs and with the new rules, 20 stolen bases even possibly. So, and still 28 years old. I'm going with Tyler O'Neill here.
The thing with Buxton needing to play DH is that Minnesota is not short on players that need to play DH. Between Kirilloff and Correa, and Royce Lewis and Byron Buxton,
maybe Miranda,
as he comes back from his surgery. Yeah. So he can't necessarily play DH every day, and that either means he's forced back into the outfield or he's forced to take a couple of rest days, which obviously you don't want to see if you're drafting him in a gladiator or pretty much anywhere. I mean, O'Neill has the most upside in the fact that, St. Louis's outfield is not as crowded as it once was. They didn't tender a contract to Juan Yepez. And they've got some, they obviously still have some mouths and feet. It's not a Cincinnati situation that we talked about with Fraley. But if they do make any kind of a move, whether it's Tyler O'Neill getting bumped out or somebody else either getting traded for a pitcher or whatever, there's more opportunity for him to, play as often as his health will allow. So I like that, like the upside there as well as much, Byron Buxton has MVP upside. We all know that because when he does play, he's usually very good. Though he's probably just not allowed to run anymore. Tyler O'Neill at least is allowed to run. There's something to be said for that. All right. Well, Kevin, I mean, we only hit on hitters. I mean, pitchers are there's so much more wild card revolving around pitcher injuries, whether they come back, what kind of production is. Perhaps that's a whole nother episode. But we did leave them out for this episode. We will get to them in another time. But to close this out here, any other? I was really disappointed that neither one of our draft didn't fill while we were talking in the last hour. But hopefully we'll get it filled before turkey hits the table tomorrow. And we'll all be drafting. But any other words of wisdom you want to chime in with?
Just a reminder. One of the things that I like to bring up, things that we all know, but sometimes can be easy to forget. When we start seeing more and more projection systems come out throughout the offseason, be really careful about cherry picking players that have much better projection in one site than another. It's always something worth diving into and seeing if you can find the reason. And if you believe in that reason, then by all means, that can be very helpful. But be very careful about when we start looking at multiple projection systems, cherry picking the best projection for different players. Something everybody knows, but it can be hard sometimes. Ooh, Todd Zola likes this guy better than everybody else. Move him up my draft board. It can be tough not to.
Yeah, let's also keep in mind that you are the one drafting, not the projections.
Exactly.
You have to make those choices. You can use whatever research you want, but it's still your choice. All right, well, that is going to wrap it up for episode 139 of On the Wire. You can follow myself on the Twitter at 80Gray. That's all spelled out. Kevin is at Hasting Kevin. Of course, follow the pod itself at On the Wire Pod. I'd like to thank our sponsor for today. That's Factor Meals. Make sure you check the link in the show description to get your 50% off code. After all that, I am Adam Howe on behalf of Kevin Hasting. Thanks for listening, and we bid you goodbye.